Well, yeah, I'm Pal Barger, and we're on Revere Street behind the post office downtown, and this was the very first Pal's. First McDonald's was built in 1955 and opened in April of '55, and we opened here in 1956. So we were one of the pioneers in fast foods. You want me to kind of tell you what this was to start with?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, this patio wasn't here where we're standing filming from, and the original store where you see the roof stop, kind of go back up. That part wasn't back there. We built that on later, and then in the front where you see glassed in, that wasn't glassed in originally. That was just open. And there was a lot of psychological reasons for that. Back then, the service stations didn't have a shed over them because they felt that people felt obligated if they drove under something. So that's why we didn't have it like coming into a building. And this was kind of copied, I guess, like after ice cream stores. Remember the original Dairy Queens and Dairy Hearts or whatever they were, they just walked up to the window. So we had problems originally because this was the first walk-up hamburger place, and we would have people to say, you better get yourself some curb hops, you're going to go broke. But we had to keep people on their lot, one person, when people come up, to kind of explain to them what the system was. We'd tell them, it's like an ice cream store. You have to get out of your car and go up and order at that window, and you pay, and then you move down, you pick up your food, and then you can bring it back to your car and eat it. So we sell our hamburgers cheaper because we don't have to have curb hops. So this is kind of self-service. And on the front of it before, I had on the two little things on each end of the building that said Pal's on it, and then all the way across the front in neon was self-service, and the sign where it was Pal's with burgers and shakes 19 cents. And then I changed when the prices went up, I took the 19 cents off and put the Pal's up there. So that's kind of the story on that. How I got the name Pal. My dad was on a City League basketball team here in Kingsport, played for Kingsport Drug, and one of his friends on there, Luke Bellamy, always said, yeah, he's our pal. And so I had a uniform, and I had a picture somewhere of the team and me sitting on the basketball at about 3 years old. So they'd put me on their shoulders before the game or at halftime, and give me the ball, and I'd sit on their shoulders and go out and shoot the ball in the basket. Yeah, this is Kingsport Drug basketball team. I guess it's kind of like a City League, and this fellow here is Blackie Grills. I remember he's a real good friend of Dad's, went to school with him. And this is Paul Bellamy, and he was later, I think, president of Associated Transport, which was out next to Scobie's, which I bought the truck terminal later, and it's now our warehouse. I rented it out since 1971, and then Pet was the last tenant, and when they moved out, I turned it into a warehouse for Pals. And this is Luke Bellamy. That's his brother. And he named me, he said, and here I am sitting on the basketball. This must have been about 1934. I must have been about 4 years old. And he said, he's our pal. And that's the way I got the nickname, Pal. And so nobody ever called me Pal in school or anything, but just my parents and my sister and some of Dad's mother's friends, because but everybody called me Fred. So that's why now my wife, if somebody calls the house and says, can I speak to Fred, she immediately says, Pal, here's one of your high school buddies that wants to talk to you. And then when I got ready to do the first Pals, my mother, we came up with the name, said, well, why don't you call it Pals? He said, we call Scobie's, which is my mother and Dad's nickname, we call our place Scobies, and Pals is real short, and it won't cost you too much to put it in neon. So that's why I was looking for something like that with Burger in the name of it or something, anyway, she's the one that kind of named Pals. A while ago I mentioned about Scobies. My parents, we had a place called Cherokee Beverage, and it was hard to get beer during the war. And Dad had a lot of beer connections from previously when he had a beer distributorship. So he was able, he worked at Host and Ordnance during the war, and then this may have been like in 1945 or something like that. And he got down in his back and he told my mother, he said, there should be something that we could do at home to make a living. So they started a company called Cherokee Beverage. We'd take phone orders. Mother would answer phone. We only had enough business to deliver beer on Friday, and we got like 15 cases of Bud and Blue Ribbon and Slits, I think, and then we could get several like Brucks and some of the off beers, and so it was kind of hard to sell to everybody wanted a premium beer. But we delivered that, and then about a year later, they said, we got excess beer here, why don't we open a place to sell beer? So they opened Scobies on Fort Henry. It used to be a bootlegging joint. It's like where the Minute Market was up next to where I live now. And Henry Miller, Jim Miller's dad, owned that property, and we rented it from him for $20 a month. And it was an awful looking old building, but we had put a barbecue pit out in the front, and we had beer and barbecue on the curb. I think beer at that time was like 15 or 20 cents a bottle, and then barbecue and hamburgers were like a quarter. And so, but hamburgers and barbecue was great, and like at night, and particularly on Friday and Saturday nights, you couldn't hardly get in on the lot. Of course, it wasn't paved; it was all graveled and all. But we did a big business, and so that was in like '46. And so they had a law on there, you couldn't be within 2,000 feet of a church or a school. And so they measured it, and it was like 6 feet. They measured it from a church here in Litz Manor, which is on Warpath. And they measured as the crow flies. They was trying to get rid of the beer. So then that's when Dad and Mother bought the lot over here where Scobies is now. And it was just like 20 by 40 building, and they had a barbecue pit out front, and they sold beer and barbecue and hamburgers on the curb. And sometimes on Saturday night, I'd waited on a car out on the road. It was all gravel then, and our parking lot was gravel, and we'd have a disc jockey, Charlie Deming, would on Friday nights or Saturday nights, he would sit in the window and play records. So he was a radio announcer for, I think, WKPT, and he'd do this kind of part-time. And so they had to have everybody stay in the cars. They couldn't get out and sit on the fenders or anything. So it kept it pretty, never had any problems or anything. But sometimes on Saturday nights, I waited on cars out on the road because they couldn't get on the lot. And on Saturday nights, most every Saturday night, we'd do around $1,400. So when you think about a beer being a quarter, and today they're $2.50, so that'd be the equivalent of about $14,000 in beer and hamburgers and barbecues on Saturday night with curb hops. And the curb hops, we had a lot of them. Some of the postmen that worked at the post office would hop curb. Now Red Roberts that worked at Cherokee Motors, he was a parts guy down there at the Buick place. He worked here part-time. And so I had mostly men, adult men that did it as a second job, because we were only open at night. We weren't open during the day for the curb service. And there was no inside seating. But I remember a friend of my dad's, I was waiting on the car. I could carry 14 beers in my hands between my fingers and stack them on my hands. And so it was some of Dad's friends, and I kind of knew they were. And so I was taking some beer out to him, and he says, well, how come y'all charge a quarter for beer here? They just get 20 cents for it downtown. I said, well, we make more money than they do downtown. So he said, he told my dad about that, and so Dad got a pretty big kick out of it. But kind of before that, some interesting things maybe. My dad, and we used to go to the ball games, Cincinnati ball games. He was a friend of Andy Semenick, which he's from Elizabeth, and he was catcher for Cincinnati. And we would drive up and see that this was about 1946, I guess, when we'd go, and we'd stop at Colonel Sanders' place at Sanders Court in Corbin, Kentucky. And Dad had known the Colonel back from when he had beer delivery, or he had a wholesale beer delivery business, and supplied some of the other beer joints around town. And so we would stop in, and I was maybe 15, 16, of course, teenager, I could eat, and he had biscuits and honey, and I'd sit there while he would talk. The Colonel always come out and sit down and talk to us, and so I'd sit there and eat biscuits and honey until my dad made me quit. So but back then, when he had a beer delivery route, the reason he got to know him, he had a gas station there at Sanders Court, and he would go to Cincinnati to pick up the beer and bring it back. And he'd charge his gas on the way back, and then the next trip up, he'd pay for the gas that he'd got coming back from Cincinnati back to Kingsport. So, of course, then he was running. Colonel was running one joint there, and of course he was a friend of Dad, and he'd known him through the beer distributorship. While I was working on the curb at the old place, I took my money that I made in tips and salary, whatever, and went over to Pierce Airport, where Meadowview is now, and I took flying lessons. And my dad and mother didn't know I was doing that. So he had, by that time, he'd accumulated 5 or 6 beer joints around town. He had a couple out on the river bridge, on either side of the river bridge, and had one called Tiptoe In. I think he tiptoed in and staggered out, but and then he had another one on the other side of the river. And he had a couple downtown where the Electrolux building is now. I called it the Shamrock. Dad sold that Shamrock, and he took a motorcycle and an airplane in on trade. And he said, it's a shame you can't fly an airplane. I just traded a beer joint for one, and I give it to you. I said, I can fly it. He said, you can? I said, yeah. He said, well, let me see you. So we went out to Pierce Airport, where Meadowview is, and it was like a 1941 Cub. And so I just climbed in there and took off, and he was standing there with his mouth open. So I had an airplane, and I guess he thought, well, if a kid can fly an airplane, surely he can ride a motorcycle. But I had never ridden a motorcycle, but he left it there at the house, and so when they weren't there, I'd take it in the field back over behind where we live and practice. So I learned how to ride the motorcycle then. My grandmother lived up on Old Stage Road, and I'd flying up there one day, and I flew under the telephone wires and up over her house, and she fainted in the front yard. She thought I was going to hit her house, and I was accustomed to flying under the river bridge out in the Holston River, so I didn't have too much sense with an airplane at that time. But anyway, let's see, where do I go next year? I guess after that, well, I went to school for a couple of years, and then I enlisted in the Air Force, and because everybody was getting drafted, and so Bill Payne, a friend of mine, and myself, we enlisted in the Air Force, and we went on the 17th of December in 1950, and we went to San Antonio to have basic training, and so they had so many people coming in. We got in before Christmas, and after Christmas, a lot of the people enlisted to wait until after Christmas. And so they were sleeping in tents and everything. So we happened to get in early, and we at least had barracks and all. But they cut our basic training short a couple of 3 weeks, and I got shipped out to Austin, Texas, to Bergstrom Air Force Base. So I got a good job, got a desk job, which I was kind of proud of, rather than being air police or in the food service. I later moved from communication squadron to headquarters squadron, and the sergeant and the captain there, they liked me pretty good, and I did a pretty good job. And you had to be so long in grade before you get promotion. But the captain always, just as soon as the time was up, he'd put me in as outstanding airman so I could get promoted. I made staff sergeant in 18 months. And I'd write Bill a letter. I said, Bill, it's rough over here. I said, sometimes it's weeks before you get a promotion. When I was in the Air Force, stationed in Austin, there was a hamburger place there. This was before McDonald's and all. Well, it was before Ray Kroc got into McDonald's, but there was McDonald Brothers in San Bernardino, California, which Ray Kroc was selling multi-mixers, and I guess everybody knows the story. He went out there and he talked to him, letting him franchise the McDonald's concept. But I would go to 2J's, and I knew enough from working at Scobie's. I knew kind of what I was seeing. And so I went in, and at that time, you know, the buildings were like glass on 3 sides, so you could see what they were doing about cutting the potatoes and making the hamburgers and all. So I asked them. I told them my parents were in the restaurant business, and I thought that was really neat. Could I come in and would they kind of show me what they're doing? And they were very, very secretive about it, and they wouldn't show me. So what I did after work, I'd come and park my car at the back of the lot, back in, and I'd face the building, and I had binoculars, and then they had the old-timey cash register, you know, where you push the 20 and the 5, and 25 cents would pop up. So I kept me a pad there, and I'd keep track of the sales, kind of maybe on half-hour increments or something like that. Then I'd count the people. Well, they got 17 people in there, 15 people. And I'd take the sales, and of course, I kind of knew about what food cost was. So I thought, well, you know, this is really a neat way to be in the restaurant business. I was planning on being an accountant. I wanted to be a CPA, and so that's what I was. What I later went back to school when I got out of the Air Force. But anyway, that's kind of where I got the idea from 2J's. So I just keep that after work, and I did it up here. I'd go there and watch a lot, and I'd eat a lot, and so I got to know a lot of the people. You know, they recognized me from coming in there to eat and all, but I never could get into the back. But I could see most everything from. When you walked up to the counter, you could see most everything that they were doing. But at that time, I think we were 15. Let's see, I think McDonald's started about 15 cents. I believe theirs were 18 cents at the time. You know, so but they were doing a big bit. And ironically, later on, the sons of 2J's came to our classes at Powell's Business Excellence Institute. I didn't get to meet them. I was out of town. But they had heard about Powell's, and they came to learn from us, and we weren't secretive as they were. So if we can help people with that, we do that. After I got back out of the Air Force, I went in December of 17th of 50, and I got out December 17th of 53. And then I went back to school, and then while I was still in school, my mother and Dad leased a Virginia house, a restaurant in Marion, Virginia, for me, and so I'd go on weekends there. Otherwise, my mother was up there looking after it, but I'd do it part time while I was going to school, and then when I got out of school, I went up there and ran that. But that wasn't really what I wanted to do. I had in mind doing the hamburger place. And so I stayed up there for about 1.5 years, and then I sold it, and I cleared, while I was there, it was like 6 in the morning until 10 at night. And I was there when it opened up. I was there when it closed up 7 days a week. Lived in a $50 a month house, and in fact, my son was born in Marion. My daughter was born in Texas, while I was in the Air Force, and so I'd saved $10,000, which was a lot of money at that time, and I came back and I borrowed $10,000 from Bob Bray at First National Bank. So that's what it cost to open the first Pals on Revere Street. And when I didn't asphalt it, didn't have enough money to do that, but it was just kind of rock. The lot was just had rocks and hot topped on it. So, but that was building, sign, equipment, everything was $20,000. Now the drive-throughs with the land are over $1 million. So it's kind of all relative. Oh yeah, and I guess another thing that I didn't mention, but about before I mentioned to Ray Kroc about franchising thing, I was in Chicago at the restaurant show in 1955, and I was talking to the booth there. They had Santa served milkshake machines, and they had a conveyor broiler. And so I was talking to them, and I was telling them what I intended to do and how I was going to build this place. And so when I got through talking to him, this guy was standing there, and he said, he said, I heard what you were saying, what you were going to do there. So we just opened up something like you were talking about out in Des Plaines. And so it was Ray Kroc, and I went with him out at lunch. He said, we're going out there at lunch to look at it if you'd like to go and look at it. And I said, yeah, I'd like to. So they had opened in April of '55, that first location. So I went out with Ray Kroc to see his very first McDonald's. Of course, he was a little ahead of me. He had one, and I was thinking about one. So, but he got a few more than we have now. But anyway, that's the Ray Kroc story. You know, hindsight's 20/20. But I was open about 3 days, and then of course everybody back then had a grand opening. You know, so I was selling hamburgers for 19 cents and milkshakes 19 cents. So I put a half-page ad in the Kingsport Times, and for grand opening on Friday and Saturday, hamburgers and milkshakes, 2 for 19 cents. And we had them lined up down Revere Street, all the way up Revere Street, down Center Street in front of the post office. And the power company had not put in a big enough transformer. And you know, we were doing fine when we were doing regular business, but when all the machines got loaded up full power, it just died. And we just couldn't get the people out. Normally it'd take us 5 times as long to get a hamburger out as it had before. So if the capacity had kept up, we could have taken care of the people. But that really hurt us. So that means you need to do your homework and cover all bases. And of course, now we don't even do people are anticipating us opening. We don't do like I say, a grand opening per se. We just do they put the flag, when the flag fly, we had a big flagpole, and when the flag flies, we're open. So people are anticipating us being open, so we don't do grand openings anymore. Very like it. One key. One key fits everything. So this part back here, this was the back wall initially, and as you saw from outside, we put an addition on there for storage, and then the little office over in the corner, when we added that on, we extended the building out a little bit there, and in the back, the sink wasn't as big. It was a regular 3 compartment and not that big. So we did all the back preparation and everything back here. We cut her French fries and peeled her potatoes, cut her French fries, and then down in the other building where the office is, right at the end of the patio, we had a little commissary down there, and we patted out the hamburgers there. We had it and did it for all 3 stores. That's when we had 3 stores, and we'd pat out the hamburger patties and use them here and take them to Lynn Garden and to Brooks Circle. Dad from Oakwood Market, he was getting he had baby beef for lunch, and he got some of his steaks and different things from Oakwood Market. So I got my hamburger from Oakwood Market, and I'd just go down there and get it. They'd have it packaged up in like 20-pound packages, and I'd put it in the trunk of a car and bring it back. It was just about 2 or 3 blocks, and so I'd bring it back, and we had a patty machine in our little building down behind Pal's, and I patted out our patties there. It was a holomatic machine. It was kind of new and hadn't been around long, but we didn't have to take them out with an ice cream scoop, so we could pat the hamburgers out there. Another thing we did on the original menu, the only thing we had, what we call now sauce burgers. We had the hamburger, French fries, chocolate and vanilla milkshakes, and soft drinks, and of course cheeseburgers, double burgers, that kind of thing. But anyway, I fixed mine in a sauce. Normally, you know, people like McDonald's were putting ketchup and mustard and pickles on their hamburgers, and they were taking a cold product and putting on a hot bun and a hot piece of meat. So I said, well, why don't I just mix that together and heat it? So I just put our sauce basically is ketchup, mustard, and pickle relish. We didn't want to put whole pickles in there. They'd be kind of hard to chew in a sauce. But anyway, we've got those ingredients plus some spices, a hot product going on a hot sandwich. So we just dip them in the sauce and put them on there, and everything is hot. So whether it's right or wrong, I don't know, but some people say they get addicted to the sauce burgers. So that's why we do them the way we did them. And of course, then we had Coke fountain, and we had Coke and root beer and orange, and I made a root beer and orange syrup. So that's all the three soft drinks, and that was kind of what was popular then, because that's about 1956, and that's kind of what we started out with on our soft drink. Oh yeah, another thing that we tried was pizza, and this was before anybody in town or anything knew anything about pizza. At then they called it pizza pie, and nobody had ever really heard of it. Maybe you might have 10 people in town that knew what pizza pie was. But I tried it some other places, and I thought, well, now that's good, and that'll go good. So I put in pizza. But what happened, I had a sign in there, try our pizza pie. So people would come get a hamburger or a hot dog, they'd go back to their car and they'd sit there and eat it, and then they'd come back in. So I believe have some of that pie now. And I'd explain to them, you know, this is not really a dessert. This is like a pizza. You eat that before. It's not a dessert. So, you know, I never did really get the people educated to pizza. Another thing that we did, they're talking about the pizza and taking it out. I later put in chicken, fried chicken, and we did kind of like a broaster pressure fryer, is what we cooked it in. And of course, it was slower than hamburger, but we sold a lot of chicken, and we did one of the first remote broadcasts at WKIN when Ken Manus was there, and Phil Roberts, and had Honest John, cabinet shop. He's a friend of Dad's. He built what we called it a little building, and we set it at the end of the patio on Revere Street. And now this was this was before I did the other two stores. This is when we had just the first store. So this must have been in maybe 58 or 59, somewhere along there. So we put that down. It's like a little 6x8 building, or 8x10, whatever. And Phil Roberts got to calling it the Chicken Shack because we were selling fried chicken. It was real small. So he when he was doing radio broadcasting, he called it the Chicken Shack. So that's where it kind of got its name. We're doing about 20-25% of our business in chicken. So radio broadcast, this was kind of something new for the area. I think maybe one other person had done it before that at a tire store. But anyway, it was kind of, the kids came and everybody was listening to the radio. This is before TV, or not many TVs out, I guess. And Phil Roberts and Ken Manus would come down sometime. He was manager of the station, and one or two other things, Gary Roberts, I believe, and so they would kind of take turns.
Where was the Chicken Shack?
Right here, right at the end. Chicken Shack was right at the end of the patio, and WKIN did the remotes. This is one of the first ones Pete Moore had an appliance there, and he had done one or two, but this was kind of a new thing, you know, having remote radio broadcast, and that kind of really helped us put us on the map. And Phil Roberts, he was kind of funny. He was a disc jockey, as well as Ken Manus, and we had a couple of others, but Phil Roberts would say, "Come on down to Pals, 10,000 flies, can't be wrong." Anyway, the chicken, after holding us up, we couldn't get it out fast enough. And I told Eldridge Hawk, we used to call him Chicken Hawk, and that's where I was getting chicken from. And I said, Hawk, I said, we're not gonna sell chicken anymore. And he said, "You crazy?" He said, "You're selling more chicken than anybody in town." I said, "I know, but we can't get our hamburgers and stuff out. People are waiting on chicken. The lines are too long." And so anyway, he didn't understand that, and I probably didn't either at the time, but I knew we had to do something. So taking a product that was going good, took it out, and got back to our basics. So then with the radio broadcasting and the name recognition coming out, then our hamburger and hot dog business, or hamburger business at that time, took off. So sometimes you live and learn. We've learned we don't need too much on the menu. We try to keep it simple. After all, it's fast food, and every time you add something, it slows you down. So we've tried to stick pretty much to the basics, just like even now on breakfast, we don't do waffles, pancakes, or eggs. You know, we try to keep it simple with sausage biscuits, ham biscuits, gravy biscuits, and keep the basics. So we have something that people can drive with and eat a biscuit on their way to work or whatever. People have asked me, said, where'd you get the sudden service name? Well, I was trying to figure out, you know, we have fast service, you know, and you have quick service, but what's faster than that? You know, what's faster than fast or quicker than quick? It's got to be sudden. So that's where I came up with the palette sudden service. So it's been a pretty catchy tag, I guess. So that's how we came up with it. Another kind of funny little story, I guess, when Jim Weld, when I built the pals over at the Circle, Jim and I back and forth, and people don't know, they think we're serious when we're kidding with each other, and I never smile and just look at each other like we're dead serious. And so Jim was out when I was putting it on, and when he was at Eastman, he designed the PALS, the PALS part of the logo. Baroni put the splash and added a little class to it. Jim Wells, as you know, is not too classy. So anyway, he had the camera shop and all like there, and he came over and said, and I had everything kind of spruced up, and he said, "Pal, you know, you're having this really nice looking over here, and you're going to make my building look bad." He said, "It looked like you'd paint my building for me." I said, "Jim, I'll be glad to if you let me pick the colors." He said, "No, it's okay." He said, "I'll take care of it myself." So anyway, he always told me about him doing the logo, and he never got credit for it when he was working at Eastman. They were trying to sell their plastic signs, and they had a design team that would help people so it would use their signs. And back then, all the signs were in neon instead of the black backlit plastic like they are now. So Jim kept on me, and I was out there, and I said, "Jim, I know you tell me that you did that PALS logo, but I know Janet, your wife, is a smart one in the family, and she probably did that, and you're trying to take credit for it." He said, "No," he said, "I did it, and I want you to give me credit for it." I said, "Okay." Tomorrow I put on, and then the next day I put on the menu, this is before we were open, we had different things on the sign like opening soon or whatever. I put Janet Wells, I say, how do I have the thing? Oh, PALS logo designed by Janet Wells. So he come out there the next morning all puffy, you know, he said, "I told you that I designed it." I said, "Jim, I don't believe you, but tomorrow I'm going to give you credit on the board." He said, "Okay." So next morning I went out and I put on there, "Logo designed by Janet Wells, husband. You know, it's talking about technology now. We use 1850s technology sometimes in our store. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. In the original PALs, there was no data registers in 1956. Of course, no computers or anything. So what we did to order, I came up with a system using tickets. This is you come here and place your order, and then initially, before data registers, and the only thing was the old-timey NCR registers, you know, you had to push 20 and 25, and there was no way to keep track of your inventory. So what I had 6 tickets. I had a ticket holder right under here. Anyway, if somebody come up and ordered two hot dogs or 2 hamburgers and a fry and a drink, we pulled 2 white tickets and 2 red tickets. So we knew that one of the red tickets for drinks and one was for French fries. But and so we give those to the customer, and they took them down, and we just knew. I mean, you knew you could multiply it in your head. You're like 2 hamburgers, 19, be 38, and a French fry, 48, and a Coke, 58. So in 2 cents tax was 60 cents. So, or you could have lunch for a hamburger, fry, and a Coke for 38 cents, and 2 cents for tax, and you had lunch. But anyway, that way we could keep track of our inventory, and to separate the drinks and the French fries, we counted the French fry bags and we counted the cups. If we had one that got messed up, we just mark it as stale on an inventory sheet. And at the end, we count hot dog buns, we count hamburger patties, we did the inventory like that. And so you had your ticket numbers that you could subtract out, and you multiply them out so you could see if your food. So it's kind of like it is now. Only thing we just use like theater tickets, just a little small ticket like you get at the theater. And the funny thing, one thing, one girl working in the morning when we first opened, and she come in early, and so I said, Sue, I said, did you eat 2 slices of cheese this morning? She said, yeah, I did. I said, did you eat 3 slices yesterday? She said, yeah, I ate that. You know, we gave them her food, you know, but they needed to mark it down. But so anyway, we were building a patio down there later, and the guy that was doing it, his name was Litton, and he was pouring the concrete. He'd gotten a cup of coffee and come back up there and said, can I get a refill on this coffee? She said, Lord, no, honey. She said, pal, I know it just as soon as he got in. She figured if I figured out the cheese, I could figure out if somebody got a refill on their coffee. But anyway, things evolve. Of course, people have said, you know, did you plan on having this many restaurants? Back then, it started in '56. Well, you know, you only had one restaurant, and you stayed with it from morning until night, and that's what I did. I came in, of course, we weren't open for breakfast at that time. We were open lunch and dinner. And I'd come in, you know, about 8 o'clock, get everything ready, and then at midnight, I'd come home. So I did that 7 days a week, and my wife would bring me lunch she'd come out here. Scobie's had vegetables and all, and she'd come get me a plate lunch to bring it back down to Pal's for me to have lunch. She'd work during lunch, you know, for an hour or so during lunch on the cash register, and then she'd leave, come out to Scobie, get me a plate lunch and bring it back. But I stayed there for every day from about 8 until 12. So you know, and I didn't plan on doing any others. But then later I expanded into I bought. The Pals in Lynn Garden was an ice cream store called the Arctic, and I left it. I didn't do the same thing. Didn't call it Pals. I left the name alone, and put in little crystal type hamburgers. They were 12 cents hamburgers at the time. So I kept the ice cream, the milkshakes, everything was. The only thing I added, of course, we had soft drinks already, and I didn't have no French fries. Just had the little 12-cent hamburgers. And so then, after I'd been doing that for a while, and I was prepared this time, and I ran an ad on that, hamburgers 5 cents each. for a Friday and a Saturday. On Friday, we sold 8,500, and on Saturday we sold 12,000. And but nobody waited. We never had more than 2 or 3 or 4 people in line at one time. And I'd bag them up. I'd put 12 in a bag. Somebody orders 10, we'd take 2 out, hand them to 10. And everybody just went like clockwork. So then, after that, I had the ice cream and the milkshakes and the sundaes and everything were still doing about the same. But then it wound up the hamburgers were about 85% of the business. So, and then the ice cream was 15%, but it was still doing the same amount of ice cream volume that we were. So then I went to leased a land at Brooks Circle from Harvey and Charlie Brooks, and where there was a Esso station there. And I built right next between the park and the Exxon or Esso station, and I had that for like 10 years. And then I was paying $500 a month rent for the land, and so then they didn't renew my lease after the 10 years because they built a bigger service station. So that that taught me a lesson: never leased again. If we couldn't buy the land, we don't go. And I have people call and say, best location, how much you want for it? Don't want to sell it, don't want to lease it. Well, we're not in it. Well, it's the best location you can have. I said, well, if you decide to sell it, you call me and we'll come look, but if we can't buy it, we're not going. So, well, the exception to that, of course, mall in Johnson City, and then we have a strip center in Greenville.
Now, where is Brooks Circle? Where was Brooks Circle?
You know where well, let's see, you know where the old Highway Patrol office is? And Zoomers, the new Zoomers. Mm-hmm. Okay, you know that intersection, Eastman Road and Center Street and Memorial Boulevard, there was a circle there, Brooks Circle. And Memorial Boulevard that goes up there, it's blocked off now. That was another, you could go straight up through there. And it was blocked off and made a 4-way street instead of a 5-way. So I still call it Brooks Circle, you know. So, and you went past the Peggy Inn and you go to Brooks Circle. And at one time when live here, the city limits was there at Peggy Inn, then it was moved to Brooks Circle. So where I live now is way in the city, but back then I paid tuition to go to school. Right after I got out of high school, they moved it out there. I wouldn't have to pay. But the Arctic, you know, what I was talking about a while ago about 12-cent hamburgers. Then I later changed them all 3 to Pals. The Circle Burger, we had Circle Burger, Arctic, and Pals. I changed the name to all Pals and put the Pals menu in. I was at the restaurant show, and there was a company that made what they call a muffler man, and the one that we have on the building in Lingard now is 17 feet tall, and it held a muffler. And so I asked him, I said, could you have that fella holding a hamburger? And he said, well, yeah, we can do that. So I ordered the big man. It was made in California, and holding a hamburger, and I paid $1,700 for it, delivered. And they hauled it in California, a tractor trailer, fully assembled, laying down, and we had to get a crane. We put it on top of the building. We didn't do anything else, no more advertising, except put that man on top of the building. And the next month, our sales increased, went up 25%. So, you know, it was an attraction. So later on, we've taken it down a couple of times to refinish it and all, and people, you get all kinds of phone calls. You're putting a big man back, aren't you? Where is he? I said, well, he's on vacation. He'll be back. You know, don't worry about him. He's having a good time. But anyway, that was one reason when I started other Pals. I thought if Big Man does good, Big Food will do good too. So we put Big Food on the Pal, and I'll explain that later.
When did you stop working on the front line?
Oh yeah, I always did. I mean, I worked 8 in the morning until 12 at night, 7 days a week, you know, in the store. And then I had the one store, and then when I did Lynn Garden and did Circle, I had 3 stores, and I had managers in each store. And I wasn't making any more money with 3 than I was with 1, because, you know, I was there. So that's when I kind of put in the management system, so that they'd have the same interest in it that I did. But see, I was doing that, and then I had the Old West, and so I was. But when I started the stores, I was there for several years. I was just there every day,
Well, everyone talks about your passion for it, your love.
Oh yeah,
for it.
yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, when I got home at night, I wanted it to be 8 o'clock so I could be back in the store. I wasn't interested in sleeping. I'd rather be in the store. I think you got to feel that way about it. Anything you do, you got to really like it. So if you don't, you better find you another job. Or one thing, when I was working down at Powell's till late, and Bill Payne and Gordon Dykes, and we used to, after work, we'd go out and night fish we'd go to Cherokee Lake or somewhere, and we would go night fishing after I got off work and stay all night fishing. And so one time they came down, they'd been out to Moose or somewhere, and they'd had a few beers, and so this guy Dad knew at Eastman, I guess it was a government project, and he'd made what he called a lung tester. And it was a long cylinder, about that long, about that big around, and had a curved pipe coming out of it, and a little wheel on the top of it, But what happened, if you put your tongue over the hole on the pipe and blow around the edges, it'd come back and go in there and turn the wheel on the top, and that cylinder was full of talcum powder. So I was sitting there when they came in, and so I was blowing that thing, acting like it was real hard to blow, and that thing just barely turned. Gordon, what you got there? I said, well, I got a lung tester. He said, let me see that thing. He said, what do you do? He said, well, you blow it and turn that wheel. I said, it's hard to do. He said, I can do it. I said, no, you've been drinking too much. You can't do it. I hadn't even been drinking anything, and I can't do it. I just barely blow it. He said, let me have that thing. I can do it. So he got that thing, he held back, and he blew. And I mean, it just covered his face with talcum powder. He didn't realize, he didn't know what was happening, and he did it again. It pulled him up again. So his wife, Martha, first thing he said, he said, oh God, said, what am I going to tell Martha? But I had a lot of fun with that lung tester. It was all stainless steel, and I don't know if you'd, I don't know how long it'd take to make it. It'd probably a week or so, but it was really looked like a precision medical instrument, that they had. So anyway, that's the deal on the lung tester. But I guess another thing, one of the things that we did was Harold Curtis. We were kind of the worst two, I guess. We had Buddy Milhorn and Donnie Adams and Harold, myself, and different people. We'd get birthday tricks. But one time I painted Harold's house red and white striped, and put a sign in the yard, opening soon, another Powell's drive-through. And so Harold was at work. He worked at the post office and delivered mail. And so he come home, we had about 150 people in the yard, and I had him a birthday cake made on a 4x8 sheet of plywood over at Oakwood Bakery at the time, and we had to turn it sideways to get it through the door and get it into the house. But we had a birthday cake 4 foot by 8 foot, about a couple inches tall. So here come Harold home. We had a big party out in his yard, and he had his house painted red and white striped. And but Fred Grills was a building inspector at the time, and he called me. He said, "Pal, you can't open a restaurant on Millie Street." I said, "Fred, it's Harold's birthday." He said, You boys have got to let me know when you're doing stuff like this. The police and chief's already had about 500 calls. He started referring them to me. But we had a lot of traffic on Millie Street after that. On John B. Dennis, there's more traffic on Millie Street than there was on John B. Dennis. People coming by to see the house. They said, I had friends asking me, "Pal, you going to paint Harold's house back?" I said, "I got it the way I like it." So it's red and white stripe. It looked good. Harold, everything. So boy, wish it'd hurry and get dark. So another time with Harold, we had he was gone, we put Powell's cups. We had 2,000 Powell's cups, and we put them, stacked them next to each other, and stapled them together. And we had them all over the floor, all over his tables, everywhere we could get them. We had that, and then it took 6 of us, and then we went back and filled them with water after they stapled all the way to the top. The only way you could get them out was siphon it out, because if you moved one, the other one would move too. So we had to be very careful about getting out. Harold finally he'd get a few out where he could step about that much, big enough for his foot. He'd step from one to the other to go to bed, you know. So that was one of the things we did to Harold. Oh, another thing we did, yeah. This may not be good for TV, but or internet, but we had. One night we put a speaker under in his bedroom under the table, and we had the cord run out and had the microphone. We let Harold get to sleep. She knew that he had to have a big mouth to tell that. So that was a pretty good one too. But but the other 2 guys thought I was going to get hit, but I think she almost did, but she didn't. Yeah, so you have to take that one out, I guess. Let's see. But some of the other tricks we played, like birthday one day I had a new red Cadillac Coupe de Ville. I was proud of that thing. I came out one morning and it was completely full of popcorn. I mean, Harold Curtis had filled that thing up with popcorn, and so the window was down about that much. I think he'd taken a yardstick and stuffed some of it in it. It was all the way to the ceiling. Later on, a friend of mine, LD Miner, I traded in on another one, and he bought that car, and he said every time he turned the defroster on, he'd get popcorn and flare it up out of there. And another time, Harold put red dye in my hot water heater, and so I'd turn the shower on, you have to go get the towels and hang up, and then give the water time to heat up. So when I went back there, that water was blood red. I mean, I knew what had happened, so I didn't do anything. I just wrapped a towel around me, got my dock kit that I travel with, drove to Harold's house, and so happened they were having like a family reunion, and Harold had just gotten married or wasn't married yet, whatever, but his wife's people coming from out of state, and there was about 20 of them in the living room there, or the den. So I just parked my car, walked through, didn't say anything to Harold, didn't say anything to anybody. Walked through the kitchen, the living room, went in there and took a shower, walked back out, never spoke, never did anything, got in the car and left. And Harold said about 20 minutes later, one of the guys said, "Harold, who was that guy that came in here and took a shower?" Harold said, "I don't know." He said, "I thought he was with you all." So he never did tell him any different. After that, I mentioned the Old West. Opened a dinner theater in 1966 and built and operated for about 13 years. And we had different things. We worked with a couple of other theaters, one in Greensboro, one in Atlanta, on shows, and we put the shows together. Then sometimes we had a resident company. Later on, what proved to be right, we go to New York. I go to New York with the director, and we put an ad in backstage and hire the actors, and we'd hire them for 3 different shows, so we would know what part they could do in 3 different shows. So there'd be like 2 or 3 going out, 2 or 3 coming in at the time. We had quarters for them at the theater, so they lived there, and we did shows 5 days a week. Then we did a show for 4 weeks, so at the end of 2 weeks we'd start in rehearsal for the next show. So the actors that came in, they'd come in after we'd been starting the show for 2 weeks, and then they'd be in there to rehearse a new show. So that's where I really got to know New York and like New York, and we keep a place there, and we kind of, wife and I, we go up with friends and things. So we go to the show today. We still go to the shows and the restaurants and things. So I pick up a lot of ideas for business there, for restaurant business. it starts in New York or starts in Los Angeles, different concepts and things. So we picked up a lot of ideas we used, particularly when I was when I was doing scobies, so we picked up a lot of ideas there. But then I did the Old West for that long. Then my dad died in 1971, and then I took scobies over, and I changed it around into like Scobies World, and I used a company called Creative Concepts at the time, and they came in and they helped me with the menu and decor. And another friend of mine, which we're still friends today, he later went on to be managing director of Tavern on the Green for about 7 years till he retired. But he helped me with the menu and later on the bar, because we didn't have liquor by the drink to start with, and then of course he helped me with that later. But he helped me with menu items, and he's one of the sharpest restaurant people that I know. He'd traveled and spoke 7 languages and worked on cruise ships and different things. IQ of 167, really sharp guy, and so he helped me a lot with that. And then the creative concepts, they did helped me with a lot of the decor, and then Hal Carmack and myself, we came up with different theme rooms and things. But we did most of that, and they did most of the menu. But at the time we had about 4 menus. We had the butcher shop, the Oriental room, and the back room, which was before that was a prime rib room with a seafood bar, and then before that it was a fish place with Wade the kids. Scobies had a reputation, had to dress up to come out of there, and I was trying to make a concept where the mechanic would come out in his clean uniform he was going to wear the next day and bring the kids. We weighed the kids, and whatever they weighed, that's what they paid to eat. So we had to scale out a lot of it. So, but people were just didn't want. I couldn't draw that crowd to me. People didn't much bring when they came out. They didn't bring their kids. They came out for a special occasion or so. But anyway, I got that, and what's happening at Scobies World, and it really got turned around, and I added the country store to it, and added the back kitchen, added some things, the clown bar and the tavern bar, put the New Orleans front on it, so everything in it was different. And then we did a 21-foot salad bar, and that was really, people really talked about that because they had caviar on the salad bar. That's another idea I got from Richie Melman in Chicago. The first restaurant he had a salad bar, and he had caviar on it. And I asked him, I said, Rich, how you afford to put caviar on it? He said, well, most people don't like it, but they talk about it. So, and you can buy it in bulk, so it wasn't all that. If everybody took caviar, it would be, you couldn't afford to do it, but you maybe have one in 20, 125 people it would take, because most people just snarl their nose up at it. So, but anyway, it was a talking point. In fact, there's an article in the Tampa newspaper, a food reviewer did on Scobies and talked about, that was a headline, caviar on the salad bar. And so I did that and worked that's the reason that we didn't expand the pals. It took pretty much all my attention. I enjoyed it. My wife did too. She worked the front, and I kind of stayed in the kitchen or wherever, the office, and she did a lot of the hosting up front. So we both enjoyed it, and she says she still misses it. But that's kind of the story on. Well, there's lots of stories on Scobies. When you kind of make changes, it's kind of hard. And when I first started Scobies and I knew what I wanted to do, I took after Dad died, just let it run itself for about 6 months. And because I'd been thinking about hamburger joints, and I'd started traveling, and I went on a lot of trips to Europe and Australia, Japan, with other restaurant people. Institutions Magazine had a group, and they had Service World International Magazine in Europe, so they had a lot of contacts, and there would be about 30 of us. We'll go on trips, and you had to be fairly successful before you could, afford to go on that. I learned more on the plane sitting next to people that I'd heard of. And probably half of the people in there I knew who they were, because of reading about them or whatever, you know. But I'd sit there and I was at that time when I went on a trip and had a pretty cute guide there, and I started dating her, and so when we'd have we'd go on different trips, and so I'd tell her, I'd say, sit me next to, say, Fred Smith on this next line. So I'd get to sit for 6 hours next to Fred Smith, which is a top restaurant designer in the country at that time, and you couldn't have bought his time. So I got to be good friends with him. And Nathan Sheriff had Sheriff's Cafeterias, and he had the first animated signs in Boston. I went up there to see him a couple of times. He was down here. He was quite a bit older, and he was kind of retired and just doing the steaming kettle at that time just to have something to do. And so I got to know a lot of those people and a lot of ideas, and you know, bounce off of them. And so, but you'd go to the restaurant conventions in Germany or Australia or wherever, but where you learned most was sitting next to those people on the plane traveling. So anyway, I did a lot of that, and then when I was and I picked up the idea, like for the butcher shop in New York from O. Henry's. They wore long butcher coats and straw hats and had sawdust on the floor, and then Maxwell's Plum, which had Tiffany shades and stuff. So I took about half a dozen of the people that was influential here. And Randy Webb, he was working with me at the Old West. He was doing PR work. Him, I took Nan, which was up front, and Murda, which she was a waitress in the back, and one of the cooks, a couple of the waiters. The people that kind of was leaders in their little area, you know, that people listened to. So I took them to New York, and I'd take them around to different places. I'd get a limo. We may go to 6 restaurants in a night, because there'd be 6 or 8 of us, so we had to have a bigger car. So, and we'd just hire a limo to take us from one place to the other. And I'd say, took them to O. Henry's. I said, now this is going to be the butcher shop, and this is the way we're going to dress the waiters. And we're going to have sawdust on the floor because we can't do that in Tennessee. But this is kind of what the concept's going to be. And I said, we're going, and then they didn't do it, but I had my menu printed on butcher paper, on a roll of butcher paper, like, you know, that you wrap meat in on white, put it on there. So we would tear it, when I come in, we just tear the menu off. We had 3 or 4 stacks sitting there, but I always tear 1 or 2 off and then pick up 2 or 3 if we had a table of 4 or 5. So, but that's the way I did the menu on that. I had it on a roll of butcher paper. And then we put the salad bar in, which I got the idea from Melman in Chicago on the salad bar. We made ours bigger than his, but we had that in the butcher shop. Then I told them I took a Maxwell's Plum, and I showed them that this is Tiffany shades. We're going to put those over the tables in the butcher shop. I took sewing machine bases and put marble on top of them for some tables, and built brick booths and had it look like a butcher shop. So every concept that I would take and show, and then it made it a lot easier to get the concept rolling, because people said, "Yeah, I saw this." You know, they'd tell other people in their area, maybe say Murda in the hall there had 2 or 3 other waitresses or a busboy. But, oh, yeah, listen, this is going to be great. I saw what he's doing. I know how this is going to be, and it's going to be a lot better than it was. We're going to have a lot more customers. It's going to be great. So it made it a lot easier. It made change a lot easier by pre-prepping those people to know what we're going to do. Let's see. I guess another thing, when we first started using computers, I had an IBM 5110. This is before PCs. When I had an accountant doing our books, and we'd go to Huff Cook Funeral Home in Bristol at night to run, and we had punch cards, and that's the way we did our thing. And it cost $65 an hour to run those punch cards through the computer and print them out. If you did it during the daytime, it was a lot more. So we went like 2 o'clock in the morning. I went there with the accountant, and we'd run those cards and had big spreadsheets like this. I thought that was just amazing how fast that printer was. You know, it'd go about,
What year is that?
But
What year is that? What year is
Oh gosh, well, let's see. It was being probably about 73, probably not 1973, and we've had a menu explosion on there. And what I did, of course, I didn't know. I got the computer and I said, "We're gonna do this," and the guy said, "Well, you got to have software." And I said, "Soft what?" I said, "I didn't know you had to do programs." So I got a guy to write a program, and this was like the first menu explode. We had, we took our ingredients, and they went from an ingredient to a sub recipe to a recipe. So then you knew exactly what's in there. Then you could take your sales and you plugged in there, and you can see if your food cost was accurate or not. So our food costs. I cut food costs by 10%. I think we had steaks and different things disappearing, but we did that, and we did a liquor program, and so I checked me for 3 years, and there was $6 difference in what the tax people came up with and what we had. So, and it really worked well on the food, and we'd inventory our main items. They were not lobsters and steaks and everything. So we knew what we were supposed to have and what the recipe called for, and we put all that in there, and you could tell exactly how much money we're supposed to do, with what items were gone, and so forth. So anyway, 5 years later, a friend of mine had come up here to see about computers, and it was Open Hearth, and his son-in-law came up and worked with us a week to see some of our systems and about the computer. I was telling his dad or his father-in-law about the computer, so he asked if he'd come up and stay with me a week. So I said, "Sure, be glad to." So he came up. So we were both in this room with a guy, a professor from a food service college, and he was telling someday this is going to happen, and he was doing exactly what we were doing. And when we took a break there, the guy says, "Pal, won't you tell him you've been doing that for 5 years? It's not going to be someday." I said, "No, I'm not going to say anything." But anyway, he said, professor said, "Someday this can happen with computers, But that was before PCs and all. But anyway, we had to have a private club at that time to sell memberships too. So we had to belong to a private club. It was we charged $1 a year for a card, and they bring as many people in as they want to. It's just a formality to get around the liquor laws, So, but we had our membership in there, so people didn't have we had to write their membership number on all the things. So if they didn't, we could call it up. We had it hooked up. The guy used to work doing software for Freddie Goldsmith, Kenley called him, and he wrote the program for that and put a Hazeltine screen up in front and hooked it up. And so we were doing that, and some IBM guys had a IBM 5110, and he said, "What do you got that hooked up to?" And I said, "We got it to 5110. He said, "You can't do that with a 5110. I said, "I know, that's what they told me, but we did." So they were just amazed that they had to go back and see it, that we had that hooked up to a 5110 on membership, so we could call it up in the front. And also something else that we had that was innovative at the time, we called Maitre T, and we had a screen up there with all the tables with red and green lights and blinking green lights, so we could really bust the tables and know who was doing what. So we could see what tables were occupied with the green light, and if they were being bussed, the green light would blink, and then if they were empty, they would be red light. So it's just like a little push button, and it was mechanical. Pushed a mechanical button. When you seated somebody, you pushed the red button. We had duplicates of their station in about 4 different places in the restaurant. So the waiters and the bus people could see what table had left and what table when we were bringing somebody to a table. We'd push the red button, and when they saw the green light come on, they could be there ready to wait on them because they know that they were being seated. So the hostess didn't have to run back and say, "We got somebody at table 7." They knew from their service area that you had somebody coming to that table. So anyway, we used a lot of technology even back then before it was popular. So that makes it too late. Went out of business. They couldn't sell enough of them to do that. But we used it until it quit till it quit, you know. But from we had, after we couldn't get parts for it, couldn't get anybody to fix it. Of course, now they have a lot of the different systems like that, but it was really helpful at the time.
If you can kind of just point and tell me what these things are, so I can.
Okay, that's my mother in her office, and that's my dad and Laurel Henriot. He was Nan Henriot's brother, which was a longtime hostess at Scobie's. And that's mother in the office at Scobie's. And here she is, the founder, and she got her corncob pipe and a .22 rifle there. She called her the whip cracker. So she had a lot of fun with that. This is I guess another picture of my mom and dad. And then here is Chris, my daughter, myself, my first wife, Carolyn, and that's my mother and dad there. And here's a final check to pay off, to payment in full, Industrial Tract 1, and $3,605. I think they paid $12,000 for the 4 acres there at Scobie's, and that was the final payment on the land. And this is my mother and dad. I guess this is high school pictures here. This was the original Scobie's on Fort Henry Drive. We rented that building for $20 a month, and that's where Scobie's started. It was 46, and then it was moved here in 48. Of course, it was just 40 feet by 20 feet when we started, and this part had been added on when they started. It was just curb service to start with, and then they slowly added rooms. Down here is the floor plan, and if you can see that, the butcher shop was just this little, I mean, this part here I was telling you about was just right here. So you can see how much was added over the years. When my dad died in '71, I added things. I added some more back here, like a bakery and a laundry and stuff, and then I added a country store here, and of course completely remodeled the whole thing. Oh, this was a picture that was made by Kingsport Times for the little section in the paper. I was on the cover of something like, it was not Parade, but it was whatever their insert was at the time. This is the barber shop in Scobie's, and this is part of the butcher shop in Scobie's. And back in here was what we call the cooler. We had an old cooler in there. A Gaslight Room, I guess, and then back here, the Oriental Room in Scobie's. And this was my office in Scobie's, and you see my ties all messed up there, and papers everywhere. So, and this is another picture of the Gaslight Room, which is back here. That's a picture of it. And this is the butcher shop in Scobie's. This is where the salad bar was through here. And that's our little patch we had for waiters for their jackets or whatever. And one of the waiters, I can't remember his name, we had in the butcher shop, but they wore long butcher coats and straw hats. And then this is Raymond Gregory, he's a cook at Scobie's. Or my son Rick. This is Dwight Hambrick, he was one of the managers at Scobie's. This is Ralph Norton, he was with me from, he came to run the old Circle Burger, and then he got into repairs and he'd fix things, so he was more valuable there. So he was with me till he died, and he was about, I guess he was close to 80 years old. And this is his helper, Henry Haar. This is Joy Blocker. She was a girl in the office, and that's her husband. This is Raymond Gregory, his chef. He was a broiler chef. This is Mike Monsoor. He was a waiter there. And this is Hal Carmack, does all of our building for us, and that was his grandson Scott. Here's Nan, and she worked for us from the time she was 22 years old until she died. And here's a picture of the country store. There's Nan at her little place at the cash register and hostess. And this was at the National Restaurant Show, and I can't remember who that guy was, but he was some kind of a vendor in the booth there. And there's a NRA. We had 79 menu awards at the National Restaurant Association. We had 5 separate menus at Scobie's. We sent all 5 of them and won a blue ribbon with 4. And this is Susie and Delilah. They were girls in the office. And that's a little replica. Somebody built that model of the Clinchfield Railroad thing, and that was in a little toy model. It was hand built, and it was in the railroad room. Bought it at an auction. I mean, not an auction, at an antique shop. And there's a picture of me when I was must have been 8 or 9 years old, or something, 7, 8, whatever. And there's a picture of me and my mother, and she had cancer. You can say she's not in too good a shape, and she died within maybe 3 months after that. Did pretty good on remembering all that.
I'm impressed, yes.